Many believers think that going to church, saying prayers, and having faith is enough. But I want to share something that changed everything I believed about following God. This is my story, a real experience that happened to me, and it's not what most people expect to hear. If this message speaks to your heart, please share it with others who might need to hear it. Let's help each other grow closer to what God really wants from us. My name is David Martinez. A few years ago, if you had met me, you would have seen someone who had everything together. I worked as a computer programmer for a big tech company in Dallas. I wore nice clothes, showed up on time, and got along well with everyone. I never missed Sunday service at my church. I could quote Bible verses from memory and regularly gave money to help our church's food program. But something inside me felt empty, like a puzzle with missing pieces. This wasn't the first time God had tried to get my attention. When I was 22, I got really sick with a high fever that made my whole body shake. My mom stayed up all night taking care of me, putting cool cloths on my forehead. That night, while I was half conscious, I saw something strange. Not with my regular eyes, but somehow in my spirit. I found myself floating above a big city I didn't know. Everything looked gray and cloudy. There was no sun or stars, only fog. Suddenly, two huge buildings came into view through the mist, and within seconds they both fell down one after the other, like something invisible had knocked them over. People were running everywhere. Some were calling out names, others were praying, and some fell down and didn't get back up. A wind full of dust hit my face, then everything went dark. I woke up shaking and told my pastor about what I had seen. He looked uncomfortable and said, "David, you had a fever. Don't worry about strange dreams." 10 days later, I watched the exact same thing happen on TV. It was September 11, 2001 in New York City. The Twin Towers fell just like I had seen, right down to the dusty wind that covered everything. My mom screamed when she saw it on the news because it was exactly what I had described. I was never the same after that. But instead of listening more carefully to what God might be trying to tell me, I did the opposite. I decided to keep quiet about it. I kept living my normal life, working hard, being a good person, and going to church. But I stopped paying attention to that quiet voice inside me, slowly shutting it out like putting out a candle. I told myself that praying, showing up to church, and being a decent person was enough. That worked until January 15, 2019. I had just finished a really stressful meeting at work. My boss had blamed me for a mistake on an important project. It wasn't actually my fault, but instead of speaking up for myself, I just stayed quiet and swallowed my anger like bitter medicine. That evening I had to go to the drugstore. My blood pressure had been acting up lately. Nothing too serious, just work stress, the doctor said. When I walked into the store, I felt this heavy weight on my chest that I couldn't explain. The bright fluorescent lights felt like needles in my eyes. Everyone's voices around me sounded like distant noise. Then suddenly my legs gave out. I heard someone far away say, "He's falling down." I reached out trying to grab onto something, but then everything went black. But this wasn't regular sleep darkness. This darkness felt thick and heavy, and somehow it had a voice that was screaming in silence. That's when I knew I was dying. I wasn't scared. I just knew what was happening. I was still me, but I didn't have a body anymore. It was like I was made only of thoughts, memories, and truth. I had nothing to hide behind anymore. No job title, no good reputation, no Bible verses I had memorized. Just my soul and a calling that rang out loud, just like back in 2001, except this time I couldn't ignore it. I can't say how long I stayed floating in that darkness. It wasn't empty, it was full of a dark presence that felt like it knew me better than I knew myself. There was no sound, but the silence buzzed like a drum underwater. I didn't have a body, but I could sense everything around me. I couldn't breathe, but my mind was more awake than it had ever been. Then something shifted. Not a voice exactly, but like a whisper without words, like wind touching my thoughts. The darkness started to crack open, slowly, like glass breaking. A line of light appeared in front of me, and I felt myself being pulled toward it. I found myself in a place that's impossible to describe with regular words. It looked like a garden, but not like any garden you'd see on earth. This garden felt broken and sad. The trees were twisted like they had been through too much pain. Their branches hung down toward the ground like hands that never stopped praying. The ground under my feet was dry but not dead. It seemed to be breathing, and what it breathed was pain. I walked barefoot but didn't feel hurt, only sadness, not my own sadness, but the sadness of millions of other people. It was like every piece of dirt had a story to tell about choices people didn't make, prayers people didn't really mean, and chances people missed. Every leaf seemed to whisper names. Every rock carried memories. This garden was the place where lost opportunities go to rest. In the middle of this garden, I saw a fountain. but instead of water, fine golden sand was falling from somewhere I couldn't see and disappearing into nothing. Each tiny grain looked like a second of time, a possibility that was slipping away. Each falling grain seemed to say, "Too late." I walked over to the fountain. When I put my hand on the edge, a flood of images rushed through my mind. Not symbolic pictures but real scenes, memories that belonged to other people, not me. I saw a woman kneeling at a church altar, praying with great emotion, but her heart was full of hatred for her sister-in-law. I saw a pastor shaking hands with someone who had just been baptized, but the pastor was really thinking about how this would make him look good. I saw a young man reading his Bible every morning, but he was doing it so he could feel better than his friends who had stopped going to church. All of these people were religious but none of them were truly changed. Then I heard a voice, not like a sound you hear with your ears, but like an identity speaking directly to my heart. It was Jesus. I knew it was him without any doubt. He didn't introduce himself or do miracles. I just knew because of what came from him, truth that cuts through lies, love that burns away pretending, and justice that holds everything together. "David," he said. I turned around. I couldn't see him, but I felt him everywhere around me, like the air itself had taken his shape. "Before I show you what's waiting for you, you needed to see this place. This is the garden where seeds that never grew come to rest. This is where good intentions that never became obedience come to dry up." "What place is this, Lord?" I asked, not with my mouth but with my heart. "This is the waiting room. This is where hearts come that have heard my voice but chose to ignore it. Here are all the promises people never kept, the prayers they said just because they were scared, and the decisions to follow me that never actually changed how they lived." Every word he spoke was like a sword cutting through all my excuses. Something broke inside me, not because he was angry but because for the first time I could really see. "Who are these people?" I asked. "These are people who called me Lord, but never let me be in charge of their lives." The roots of the trees moved slightly, like they were shaking under the weight of this truth. I understood that this garden wasn't hell, but it wasn't heaven either. It was the place where souls have to see themselves exactly as they really are, with no filters or pretending. Then the light opened wider and the garden disappeared like mist in the sunlight. I felt something pulling me forward and the vision changed, but my awareness stayed sharp. Now I understood that real hell begins when you realize your faith was just like acting in a play. The garden vanished as if it had only been a curtain, and behind it opened a world that no human heart could look at without breaking. I was no longer among broken tree roots or empty fountains, but standing on a narrow edge like a line between life and eternal punishment. Below me stretched a huge valley that went on forever. What I saw there I will never forget, not if I lived 1,000 years. The ground was black, not like nighttime but like burned skin. Everywhere there were cracks in the ground where fire came up that gave off no light, only suffering. The air was thick like tar. And yet I could breathe, or rather, I felt the breath of others, millions and millions of souls. Some stood perfectly still, others moved constantly and desperately, as if looking for a way out of a place that had no exits. Their faces, oh God, their faces. Some of them I recognized. The first was Pastor Williams. He had taught my youth group when I was younger. I still remember him telling me that knowing God was more important than just studying about him. But there he was, surrounded by flames, shouting Bible verses that dissolved in the air like sand. He had lost his voice from pleading so much and no one was listening to him. Then I saw Sarah, who led our church choir. She had such a beautiful voice that moved everyone every Sunday. But now her hands were clenched into tight fists, as if she was still holding microphones that weren't there. Her lips were moving but no sound came out, only despair. She had sung about freedom while living as a prisoner of looking down on people who weren't as spiritual as she was. "Why?" I asked, my heart ready to break. "They were yours, Lord. They served you." Jesus' voice answered me, deep like an ancient drum. "They served me, yes, but they didn't belong to me. They served religion, status, their own image. They used my name like a shield to protect them from having to be humble. They talked about grace but they built walls with their rules." Each word cut through a lie I had been living. As I walked among these souls, I saw the most terrible scene of all, a man dressed like a preacher. His robe was still recognizable, even though it was burned and torn. What stood out about him were the words he was muttering. "I preached the truth. I defended correct doctrine. I led souls to you." Jesus' voice replied, "You led souls to worship yourself. You used the truth to make yourself look important. You defended doctrine but you never loved your neighbor. Every sermon you gave was a wall, not a bridge." I was forced to watch and feel every bit of despair. These souls weren't there for the kinds of sins the world usually thinks of as evil. They were there for something more subtle and dangerous, the illusion of thinking they were already good enough. They hadn't cursed God, stolen things, or killed anyone. They had simply believed they were already saved without ever letting salvation really change their hearts. A man cried out, "I brought food to poor people. I worked at the homeless shelter." But his hands were clenched into fists, his teeth gritted not in pain but in anger. "But you did it to feel better about yourself," the Lord's voice whispered. "Not because you loved them. You judged people who didn't do what you did, and you thought that doing good things was enough to make you right with me." I kept walking. Each step felt like a judgment on myself. Each face was like looking in a broken mirror. I saw myself in those gestures, in those thoughts, in those prayers I had prayed more to make my conscience feel better than to really talk to God. I was moved again to a higher place. It was a gray area, more refined, more subtle, but maybe even more deceiving than anything I had seen so far. In front of me stood tall structures, not built of stones or bricks, but of books, scrolls, notes, marked-up Bibles, and religious commentaries. The foundations were made of quotes, the walls of arguments, and each tower had a name carved into it: doctrine, church history, end times. I walked up to the biggest one, the Tower of Truth. A staircase made of words spiraled up its side. Famous phrases, parts of sermons, conference notes. Next to the base, a man sat with his hands covering his face. He was crying not from fear, but from a pain that seemed ancient and consuming, with no healing. I recognized him, Dr. Henderson. He had taught theology at seminary for 35 years. I had read his books and highlighted his quotes. But now he was there with his head down, alone. "Professor Henderson?" I asked. He looked up. His eyes no longer held pride or wisdom, only emptiness. "I knew everything," he said, "but I knew no one." Jesus spoke behind me. He knew every detail of my word, but he never let himself be loved by it. He loved being precise but not being compassionate. He defended the truth but he didn't live it. He had built a tower, not a home. I looked around. Dozens, hundreds of souls wandered through these places. Some climbed the stairs, reciting verses, arguing, correcting each other. One quoted ancient church fathers, another made comparisons between different Bible translations. And yet they were all stuck. No one was really going up. It was fake climbing, endless motion with weightless words. A discussion caught my attention. Two men were arguing intensely about how to interpret a passage from Revelation. One said, "Jesus will return for the church before the tribulation." The other said, "No, during it." And they went on in circles. Jesus' voice grew more stern. "These people have made theology into a fighting arena. They have traded my gospel for an intellectual battlefield. Every word they spoke was a bullet, every verse a sword. But they never cried for a sinner. They never hugged someone who was weak. Truth became their crown but not their cross." I knelt down. I couldn't deny it anymore. Too many times I had argued to defend correct doctrine but not out of love. How many times had I corrected someone to feel superior, not to help them heal? I had mistaken knowing about truth for possessing truth, as if it belonged to me, as if it were a medal to show off. Jesus added in a gentler voice, "Truth without love makes people proud. Love without truth leads people astray. But truth with love changes people." How many people know the scriptures but don't let the scriptures change them? How many talk about grace but have never truly received it? One of the arguing men, noticing me, turned around. His eyes were red and worn out. "I came here to find the truth," he said. "But I didn't realize that in the process I had lost Jesus." Then he pointed to another building. It was low, almost hidden. There were no books, no carved phrases, only a simple door. Above it was writing, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God." My spirit trembled. I had spent my life trying to understand God more than knowing him. I had studied his word like a code to crack, not like a love letter. And now the towers I had admired were like beautiful tombs, pretty on the outside but empty inside. Jesus concluded, "Many have built towers with my words, but they have never built an altar with their hearts." The towers began to creak and fall silently. No crash, no cloud of dust. They collapsed like houses made of cards, soaked by truth. Only after silence settled again did a path open before me. It wasn't made of stones or dirt, but of soft light. Each step wasn't movement, but revelation. I felt the weight of lies leaving me like clothes that were too tight. And in front of me, something began to shine. A valley opened up, but not like the previous one. This wasn't a prison, but a new garden. Here the trees didn't have twisted roots, but deep, strong, hidden ones. The leaves didn't fall, but danced in the passing wind. And there, in the heart of that place, I saw them, the people who had been truly saved. They had no halos, no crowns. No one spoke loudly. No one was showing off. They walked simply. And yet every gesture, every look, every smile was filled with a glory that didn't belong to them, but passed through them like light through clean glass. A woman was folding a sheet on a clothesline. The gesture was so humble but so full of peace that it seemed like a sacred act. Jesus spoke to me. This woman washed clothes for sick people for 40 years without ever being noticed. Every movement of her hands was an offering. She never looked for reward. She never asked for recognition. But heaven recorded every fold of her hands. An old man with a walking stick moved slowly through the garden. Every step seemed to guard a secret. He prayed for his community every night without anyone knowing. When he died, many thought his life had been useless. But his prayers saved lives he never even knew about. Then I saw a little boy. He couldn't have been more than 10 years old, but the light around him was brighter than all the collapsed towers put together. He died young, Jesus said. He was disabled, but in his silence he loved more deeply than many preachers. His suffering was continuous worship. He never spoke, but he whispered love to me his whole life. I kept walking and cried not with sadness but with understanding. For the first time I was seeing the true power of God's kingdom. Not titles, not conferences, not ministries with thousands of followers, but the quiet forgiveness of a widow, the gentle touch given to a nameless sick person, the sacrifice made in the privacy of a room. I saw a mother kneeling, her face marked by years of hard work. Around her, children played peacefully. She raised 5 children to follow me, Jesus said. No one ever applauded her, but every night she wrestled in prayer. Today her children lead others to me. She never stood at a pulpit, but she raised generations. Then he showed me a scene, a hospital room. My body lying still, cold hands, closed eyes, machines beeping quietly. A nurse was checking the monitor. My sister sat in a corner with a Bible on her lap, whispering, "God, please bring him back." "It is time," Jesus said. "But remember, David, this life no longer belongs to you. Don't live for what people think of you. Don't live to prove yourself. Live for me. Tell people what you have seen and let my spirit continue what I have started." With those words, everything dissolved, not like a dream ending, but like a curtain opening. I opened my eyes to bright hospital lights, human voices, the smell of disinfectant, the steady beep of a heart monitor. There was still a spiritual presence that slowly pulled back, but not completely. I was back. The doctor said I had been clinically dead for almost 3 minutes. But in those 3 minutes I had lived an eternity. No one understood what had happened. Maybe a brain reaction, they said. A dream caused by lack of oxygen. But I knew. And I didn't need explanations. I needed obedience. Since that day my life has changed. Not in an outward way. I still work, I still talk to people, I still go to church. But everything is different. Before, I prayed because I felt like I had to. Now I pray like someone drowning who finds a pocket of air. Before, I read the Bible like an expert. Now I read it trembling. Before, I talked about God. Now I listen to him. I no longer try to appear a certain way. I no longer want to be that good Christian. I want to be real. I want to be broken. I want to be transformed. This is the message I leave with you. If you've come this far, don't trust your heart if it hasn't been broken and healed by God. Don't trust your religion if it hasn't produced humility in you. Don't trust your good works if they don't come from a love that has destroyed your pride and rebuilt you. Jesus won't come for the best people. He'll come for the least, the humblest, those who have given up depending on themselves, those who tremble when they hear his voice, those who strip away all pretending. Every hour someone dies. Every hour someone wakes up in eternity. Too often they realize they never truly knew him. Don't wait. Don't wait for a heart attack. Don't wait for a sign. Don't wait until it's too late. God's kingdom is made of honest hearts, not clean appearances. If you've made it this far, it wasn't by accident. This testimony is a wake-up call. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I want to know who you are and where God has allowed you to hear this message. If this touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Share it now. Send it to your family, your friends, to anyone who's drifted away from God. Do it now before the quiet falls again. Time is running short, but it's not too late yet. Let's get ready together.